One thing I learned from my review of Ashes of Ariandel is that when I'm reviewing a DLC, if I try to format the video like I do for a full-on game review, while it helps for bigger games, for DLCs it ends up being more cumbersome and slows the review down. So for a conscious effort to try to make this video shorter, I'm gonna try to do less of the formatting I usually do, where I usually go into the good, the bad, and the things I would change, and instead just talk to you guys about the DLC. And a very minor spoiler warning here, I'm gonna try my best to avoid talking about spoilers, but some very minor spoilers might be unavoidable for me to say what I want to say about this DLC. So you have been warned. On that note, getting right into this, the one thing this DLC does really well is its boss battles. Hell, going through every single one I played in the DLC in my head, I can't think of a single boss fight that I disliked. All but one of the bosses had a very deep and engaging story behind it with heavy lore implications. Every single boss fight has a soundtrack that's both epic and beautiful, and most importantly for Dark Souls, every single one was a tough but fair challenge. Every boss in this DLC pack likely ranks up with the best bosses in Souls history, including one boss fight that revisits the mechanic of the old monk from Demon Souls, where it's essentially a PvP fight against a super buffed up player, with the whole Covenant, ranks, PvP items all tied to it, and an insanely difficult optional boss fight that some are considering the hardest fight in the entire series, unanimously agreeing that it's the best dragon boss fight in the series, and taking its place as my personal favorite fight in the series, although there are other bosses that I like more in terms of lore. And this DLC pack also wraps up with another one of the best bosses in the entire series, with a poetic duel between two undead fighting for the last scrap of power in a crumbling world. And I previously thought the Soul of Cinder was an excellent send-off to the series, but this final boss fight blows Soul of Cinder out of the water. I seriously don't think they could have possibly done a better job of ending the series than with this boss fight. Which is why it's such a huge shame that it's not the end of the DLC. And the real ending kind of feels like they just ran out of time and wanted to leave it open to more expansions, where you feel like you have closure over the whole story after the boss fight. The true ending is such that, while trying to avoid spoilers, gives the impression that there will be more DLC to come, but it's been confirmed already that these two DLC packs are all that will be included in the Season Pass. So if there's more DLC, that means Season Pass holders still gotta pay to access it, and people who don't have the Season Pass will have to get it to access the new content, because this new plot point is built in such a way that you'll need both DLCs completed to access it. And I really don't know how else to explain why this is the case without talking about spoilers, so I guess we'll just leave it at that. And anyone who's played both DLC packs will probably understand what I'm talking about. And while the bosses are this DLC's clearest strong point, there are still plenty of interesting enemies and challenges, as well as returning enemies with unique twists. And a feature from Dark Souls 1 I've been dying to see make a return, with plunging attacks with unique animations to allow you a huge damage boost against large enemies. Something I complained was missing in my initial review for the base game. Although unfortunately this doesn't retroactively apply to all the enemies in Dark Souls 3, and it only works against the new ones introduced in the Ringed City. But I'm still really glad to see it return. And while I stand by the fact that there are plenty of interesting enemies and challenges to conquer, and plenty of gorgeous views to go along with them, there are just as many both environments and enemies that feel flat and uncreative, or at least not up to the same level of detail we expect from Dark Souls. But I still gotta give them props for listening to fan feedback about the environment, making the world vast and interconnected instead of a linear journey, and also including plenty of interesting puzzles. Some being relatively easy while others being incredibly difficult to solve. Most of them being optional content though, things that you're not intended to find on your first playthrough. Staying true to what makes Dark Souls so much fun to play and replay over again. And now the last topic of conversation for this review is the loot. If you're one of those players who likes trying out new and interesting builds for your character, you're gonna fucking love this DLC. The new zones of this DLC are packed with tons of interesting new weapons, spells, and armors to find, most of them lending themselves well to creative thinking outside the box builds, while others are just plain cool even if they are a bit on the conventional side. And on top of that, we also have some returning armors from Dark Souls 2. While Dark Souls 2 did have its shortcomings, it also had some of the best looking armors in the entire series. Unfortunately though, my personal favorites and the two sets that I was hoping would make it into this DLC somehow did not make an appearance, and a lot of the new armors unique to this DLC are nothing really special to speak of. So with all that said and done, it's time to come to the final verdict for the Ring City DLC. And I'm gonna go ahead and give this one an 8 out of 10. Although in hindsight I probably should have given Ashes of Ariandel a 7 out of 10 due to how short it was. And I feel weird giving this an 8 because that's gotta be what, the 4th game in a row I've rated an 8? But it's been warranted each time since all these games and DLCs have been trying their best to be good but fall just short of being great. And this DLC is no exception, although it is a lot better and a lot more substantial in content than Ashes was. For Season Pass holders, it doesn't quite do enough to make up for the lack of content that was in Ashes. And if Ashes had as much content and quality as this DLC did, the Season Pass would be a must-own for anyone who has Dark Souls 3. But as it stands now, the Season Pass overall isn't really worth getting in my opinion. But if we're looking at the Ring City DLC on its own, I'd say this definitely has my recommendation. Especially if you don't get the Ashes of Ariandel DLC. That means you won't have to see the true ending, and instead your experience will stop where this DLC should have stopped in the first place, leaving you with a truly epic send-off to the Dark Souls franchise. After this DLC and Miyazaki's statement that he no longer wants to work on Dark Souls, it's clear that this is the end of the franchise, but what a beautiful end we've gotten. And I truly can't wait to see what Miyazaki and From Software come up with in the future. Once again, I'd like to ask you guys, I've been working on this channel for a long time and it's still not quite where I want it to be yet. So if you like these videos, I mean, liking and subscribing sure helps, but more importantly, share the videos with your friends, spread the word. That's really the best thing you could do to help this channel grow. And until then, I'll see you guys next time.